Good day, beloved. It is Hannah with Zahar Ministries. And I love that word Zahar, which is a Hebrew word that means admonish. And I love God's call to us to admonish and teach one another. The beautiful word picture behind the word Zahar is to shine a light. And the Lord has been shining a light onto my heart and my life in two areas that come alive, and a beautiful chapter in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 6. David is my favorite character, and he speaks very personally to my heart. And I'll bring you up to speed with the story up to this point. David is the now reigning king of Israel. The prophet Samuel had anointed David king years and years ago, and David got to serve under King Saul and experience a lot of adversity at the hand of King Saul. At this point, the prophet Samuel has died. King Saul has died. The Israelites are still great enemies with the nation of the Philistines, who oppress the Israelites repeatedly. So this chapter, and I'm going to divide it into two sections, has to do with a phrase that that King David uses 4 times in this chapter, and that phrase is before the Lord. We know that King David is a man after God's own heart, and I believe that one of the secrets to David being a man after God's own heart was his consciousness of living his life in good times, in bad times, in hard times. He is aware that he is constantly living his life before the Lord. And I want to invite you into the amazing experience of living your life before the Lord. To step back a little bit into the story and continue with the context, the Israelites are experiencing great moral decline. At one point, they had taken the Ark of God, which is the box that God had instructed Moses to construct. At that point, it was probably 400 years old. And it's a box that's about 3 by 2 by 2. And in it are some holy items that God had Moses place into the box. And at one point, the Israelites are doing so poorly, and they decide during a war with the Philistines that they are going to take this ark with them into battle against the Philistines as a good luck charm. And so they take it with them, and lo and behold, they get their butts kicked by the Philistines, who not only defeat them in the war, but the Philistines take the Ark of God away with them. And they might as well just have annihilated the nation of Israel at that point, because the Ark of God was so important to them. And so the Philistines took the Ark with them to their temple and their god Dagon. And we know the story that happens there, that Dagon ends up pretty much being destroyed because of the presence of God. And the Philistines say, you know what, take this darn thing. We do not want it. And so it ends up in the house of a man named Abinadab. And this is where we meet him. So David is just a fresh king at this point. He is now reigning, and his heart is to have the presence of God in his midst and in the midst of the people, so the people can experience God. What a beautiful heart. And so he and a group of men, let's catch up in 2 Samuel chapter 6, the ark brought to Jerusalem. David, again, brought together out of Israel chosen men, 30,000 of them. He and all his men set out from Baalah of Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name, I love that, the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim that are on the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, 2 sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart. Now we remember it's been living in this house for about 20 years. With the ark of God on it, and Ahio is walking in front of it. David and the whole house of Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord. There's that wonderful phrase. With songs and with harps, lyres, tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. Verse 6, when they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down, and he died there, right beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now, King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went down and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. David, wearing a linen ephod, danced before the Lord with all his might, while he and the entire house of Israel brought the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. What a great story. It's a day that you can almost visualize with all this dancing and celebrating, and then the sudden disaster that happens, and Uzzah's dead, and David is confused and angry at God and saying, "What happened here? I don't understand." But as we go back and review what has happened in the story, it becomes very clear very quickly. What's happening here is that the Israelites, led by David, are worshiping God the way they think God needs to be worshipped. They have built a new cart and decided that this is the way they're going to carry the ark of God and the presence of God. And God puts a pretty quick stop to that. This is not God's prescription for the way the ark is going to be carried. God, Jehovah, the self-sustaining one, who is also Elohim, the supreme ruler, is saying that he is going to be worshipped the way he wants to be worshipped. Beloved, we can make a mistake of desiring to worship God, but ending up doing it the wrong way, or the way that we think is best. This new cart was an abomination to the Lord. The Lord had created had the ark built specifically to be carried on the shoulders of the Israelites. It was not to be placed on a cart with oxen. And so we see that when they come to the threshing floor, that's where judgment takes place. And this is the second time that a threshing floor has stuck out to me in my reading. And we know that the nature of a threshing floor is a place where chaff is separated from the wheat. And the Lord does a pretty good job separating the chaff from the wheat. People, it is easy for us to have experiences or to build up experiences that look good to people, that sound good to people. We can be very well intentioned. But the Lord is calling us to a place of seriousness regarding worshiping Him. Because it is very easy for us to worship ourselves, to desire to be pleased by worship, whether it's music or a message or whatever form worship can take, but to turn that onto ourselves and away from God. And I think God is desiring to be done with the chaff that our worship experiences can sometimes be, and to retain just the wheat, so that our worship experiences become strictly about Jehovah Himself, pleasing Him alone, wowing Him alone, regardless of what that experience is like. So here we see Uzzah in whose house the ark had been for 20 years as a young man. Had he become too familiar with the presence of God that he thought that it would be okay for him to put out his hand to steady it so that it wouldn't hit the floor, thinking that the ark of God hitting the ground would be any less sacrilegious than he himself reaching out? And at the forefront, this looks like overkill. But God is serious when he prescribes these things, so much so that he's saying, I will be able to take care of this ark and levitate it if I need to. I do not need you. And that's the beauty of God being self-sustaining, is he does not need us. He invites us into this worship experience, but we need to come into it before the Lord, knowing this is an amazing experience we have been invited into. We are not needed here, but we are welcome here. But that it behooves us to do this the way the master, the supreme ruler, Elohim, wants it done. So David decides that he is not going to take this ark to Jerusalem after all. He wants nothing to do with it because he's so shocked and so confused about what happened. But something happens in those 3 months. And we see, as we looked at verse 13, that he brought about people who were carrying the ark of God. He did his research in the meantime. He did his homework. And in 1 Chronicles chapter 15, he tells the people what happened. Let's look at 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 13. He says, "It was because you, the Levites, did not bring it up, the ark, the first time that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. We did not inquire of him about how to do it in the prescribed way." Those are sobering words, because God is saying that our worship experiences need to be undergirded and carried on the cart of prayer. But not even the cart. It needs to be carried on the shoulders of people that he has called priests. And I love those wonderful words that Peter used, that we are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. So we are to worship him in spirit and in truth. We're called to worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. It doesn't matter how new or newfangled or highfalutin a cart is. It doesn't matter how good it looks or how pleasing it is to us. We need to worship God the way he demands to be worshiped. And I pray that those sobering words would be words of encouragement, but also words that are reality check to us, that we would prescribe, that we would worship God the way he prescribes his worship to be carried about. Here's another beautiful point. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, David sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. I love this because David took 6 steps and then offered a sacrifice. We know that the number 6 is the number of man. This point speaks to me of us giving everything that we have, and then coming to the end of ourselves and realizing that even all we have is not enough to present before the Lord. And so we get to the end of ourselves, which is those 6 steps that we take, and then the sacrificial system has to step in and close the gap so that our worship experience is an acceptable worship experience. And we see here the blood of bulls being spilled as an atonement, and so as to make this worship experience acceptable to the Lord. And what a beautiful way to prophesy. We know that David was a prophet, and here's the prophetic picture he is painting, that man will come to the end of himself after giving all he can give, after taking all 6 steps that he is capable of giving. And then at that point, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world, will be sacrificed so that our worship experience can be restored, so that we can have fellowship with God and be able to live our lives before God. And so, beloved, I'd like to encourage you regarding your ways of worship, that your worship would be a way of life that is consciously living before the Lord. In that way, we end up being people who, like King David, are men and women after God's own heart. So thank you for tuning in for that part one. In part two, we are going to talk about the end of this story, which has to do with Michal and the spirit of Michal with which she confronts David with much derision and contempt for him. So please join me in part two of this video before the Lord, and let's study the spirit of Michal and examine our own hearts, Zahar, our own hearts, and see if there are aspects of the spirit of Michal in our lives that the Lord can and desires to deliver us from. Please like and share this video and join me in part two. God bless you.